Hey all, this is Mike Finnen again from Buttonwood Tutors. And today we're going to start attacking the overview or the content from the Series 63. Series 63 is one of the state tests that is administered by NASAA, North American Securities Administration Association. And it is in conjunction with the federal test that you either passed or you're working on right now. And the Series 63 is more of all the state tests are much more law-based tests. They're legal tests. They're almost like taking a mini bar exam kind of thing. They're more about a lot of it's memorization and also a lot of it, there's a lot of exemptions and exclusions with the Series 63, the 65, and the 66, and gets a little more complicated. This today is the Series 63, which is primarily going to deal with the USA securities laws, the state administrative laws, and how they're enforced and who enforces them, and how they relate to the overall financial picture to do business. First area we're going to look at are broker dealers. These are broker dealers. And as I say, a broker dealer is what is a broker dealer? This is an entity that is affecting that is affecting security transactions for their account or the account of others. As I say, a broker dealer, you have the broker side, you have the dealer side. A broker dealer can be a broker and can be a dealer. They can't be a broker and a dealer at the same time. So the broker side, we go ABC, agency, broker, commission, trading for the account of others, middleman. This is the dealer side is PDM, principal, dealer, market maker, markup, markdown. The analogy that I use is the difference between a broker dealer is a firm that's a broker dealer, but again, they can't be a broker and a dealer at the same time. Different transactions demand different actions. So let's think of it this way. If you were going to buy a house and the first thing you're going to do is go find a real estate broker. And that real estate broker is first thing they're going to do is show you five crappy houses so that when they show you the sixth one, it looks like a mansion and you're like, done, let's go in there. Hurry up, get to that. So that's when you are going to hire the real estate broker, they bring you around to see things. Now, when they bring you around to look at houses, you're not looking at their own house. You're looking at other people's houses who they're listing or they have an agreement with another real estate agent. And then should you decide to buy a house that they show you, you buy the house, they get a commission, right? They get a cut of the price, usually 3 or 6% or whatever they're getting these days, right? With a dealer is more like on your way home from the real estate broker, you're driving by and you see this house being built that looks beautiful on a nice piece of land, and you go and do the old, if you've ever walked into a half built like foundation up house or just the structures up, you got to be careful walking around, and then you see the guy in the back working on the house, and you ask him, what's up here. He goes, oh, I'm selling this house on spec, which means I'm built the contractor, it's a contractor, is building the house. He's going to pay $300,000 to for expenses and materials, and then he's going to sell it for say 600,000. That's the dealer side, right? So the broker side, ABC, agency, broker, commission, trading for the account of others, middleman. That's the real estate broker. You're buying a house, they're getting a commission. The dealer side, dealer, principal, dealer, market maker, markup, mark down. That's the contractor side, right? The dealer is trading out of their own inventory, trading out of their own account, trying to make money with the trades. They're facilitating liquidity. That's the dealer side. Dealers are primarily known as market makers. Um, and market makers are always constantly what they are required to make markets in a stock. So let's talk about what that means. Let's say that there was a fruit stand. And in the fruit stand, when we all know we go to buy fruit and you go and pay $2 for a fruit for an apple. pay $2 for an apple. The guy who runs a fruit stand, he sells it to you. So that is the equivalent of a market maker selling out of his inventory, selling to you. So you're the retail. You buy on the ask, as they say. You buy on the ask. The market maker sells on the ask. Well, this fruit stand has a unique thing. If you have old fruit that you bought, and we've all done it, right? Well, we buy too much fruit, and then it's sitting around the house. So if you have that fruit sitting around the house, you can sell it back to him. And let's say that for $2 you can buy an apple. For $1 you can sell your other apples back to him. So he's making a market. He's a $1 bid for an apple. He's a $2 offer for an apple. You, as retail, sell to him on the bid, buy from him on the ask. You sell on the bid, buy from the ask. Now, with the broker dealer, with the dealer side, there's also the market maker does a thing called the markdown or a markup. So in addition to the price that you sell it at or that you buy it at, they can mark up a certain amount. And the guideline from FINRA was 5%. Okay, that you're supposed to stay within 5% or less on the markup. Now, here's the thing with questions that are markup versus markdown. Let's go with this. So again, retail sells on the bid, buys on the ask or buys on the offer. So if retail is selling, that's a markdown. Think of it this way. If you went to a store and they were selling clothes, that would be a mark. They'd mark down the prices. Selling retail markdown, buying retail markup. Okay. BDs, broker dealers, register by using Form BD. That's who they register with the SEC, with FINRA, and with the admin. And in general, the way it works with the BDs is they file with FINRA, they file with SEC, and then if they're in a state, they file with the state. BDs kind of wear all the hats. Okay. IAs are different. Very often they're specifically towards states unless they're federally covered, but BDs are all of them. And a lot of the laws that come up on this test are related to how the state has jurisdiction with them and how the state has jurisdiction with the IA. The exclusions from broker dealers include agents, issuers, and banks. Let's talk about what that means. And this is the big point that I'm going to make as far as broker dealers, agents, investment advisors, and investment advisor reps. If you and I were just talking Wall Street, hanging out, having a couple beers, talking about things, we are not going to talk about the broker dealer, agent, IA, IAR. We're not going to do that. But on this test, you have to compartmentalize that. The broker dealer, the agent, the IA, IAR are very separate entities that they're going to test you on individually and try to suck you into calling one the other, which we don't want to do. So the broker dealer, the firm, the entity, the person, and we'll talk about and what is a person? A person is any entity that can sign a contract. Any entity that can sign a contract is a person. So person, when you and I talk about person, we're talking about people walking around. Person on the Series 63 and all the state tests, they're talking usually about a firm, a broker dealer, an IA. And then if they're talking about an agent IAR, it'll say the natural person that represents blah blah blah, represents a broker dealer, represents somebody who does advice, gives analysis or advice. So again, you got to compartmentalize broker dealer, agent. A broker dealer is the entity. Agent is the person that represents the entity. IA is an entity. IAR is a person that represents the entity. So again, registration is completed by Form BD with the appropriate regulator authorities. That's how the broker dealer registers with an administrator, with the SEC, with FINRA. And every year they have to file what's called a focus report. The focus report gives up their net capital computations. Now, there's two broker dealers' financials are monitored through net capital. IAs are monitored through net worth. So broker dealers in net capital, IAs in net worth. If you ever need a little trick with that, I go broker dealers wear baseball caps, where IAs are too classy to wear baseball caps, so they have net worth. So broker dealers are net capital. And again, exclusions from broker-dealer include agents, issuers, banks. What does that mean? Obviously, an agent is not a broker-dealer. An agent is somebody who represents a broker-dealer. The issuer, which are obviously the government, municipals, treasuries, or corporations, they are not broker-dealers, but you can have an agent for an issuer, which we'll get into later. And also, banks are not considered broker-dealers unless they're a bank holding company. Banks are excluded because they have their own banking laws. But if it's a bank holding company, that is not excluded. Canadian broker dealers can qualify for limited registration under certain conditions, which maybe we'll touch base on some later. One of the big things with just remembering with Canadian broker dealers is number one, they can only deal with customers who are visiting in the United States who were previously customers. Or if a customer there's moves to the US, then they can deal with them in what is the equivalent of Canadian ERISA retirement account. Also, broker dealers and IAs on the on most levels re-up their registration every December 31st. Canadians are December 1st. So if a Canadian broker dealer has a limited registration in the United States, they have to re-up every December 1st, every December 1st. Um, and that is the end of broker dealers, although I'm sure we're going to be coming back to this a little more as it is the theme of the test. Next of the four compartmentalized broker dealer agent IA IAR, we have agents. What are agents? Agents are natural persons who represent a BD or an issuer in affecting transactions. So what does that mean? So if you are an agent and you work for a broker dealer, that's an agent for the BD. You represent the BD in affecting securities transactions, either through principal. Remember, we did broker dealer through broker or dealer transactions. Broker being broker being agency, dealer being principal. Individual representing a broker dealer through those transactions, or the other one is agent for an issuer. What's an agent for an issuer? Okay. So I use the example, a little extreme, but let's say McDonald's, the company, has a hamburger flipper who happens to also be a ace investment banker. And he hears that McDonald's is doing an IPO or an APO, and he says, hey, I actually can help you guys raise $300 million in this offering that you would not have to pay to the syndicate or to the investment bank. And powers that be say, wow, that's great. Okay, can you make it a billion? Yeah, I can make it a billion. Sure. I happen to know some people, even though I'm a hamburger flipper, I happen to know some people. So what happens is the company goes, great. You can do that, except that you have to go get registered, and that becomes registered at the state level or whatever state or whatever level they're doing at. You have to register as an agent for the issuer. That's what the agent for the issuer is. Now, agent for the issuer has to register if it is a non-exempt security. If it's an exempt security and it's an exempt transaction and you work for them, then you don't have to register. In other words, somebody who works for the government selling treasuries doesn't have to worry about it. Okay. Now, it's somebody working for a company who's selling to the public, the company, they have to get registered. That's the agent for the issuer. Agents register through Form U4. U4 is hello, U5 is goodbye, right? U4 is when I come into a company, I have to sign, and you probably should know the details of what's on a U4, have an idea what they're asking you about. Um, and a U5 is when you leave. Now, U5 is a U5 has to be filed within 30 days of somebody leaving a firm. Now, what are the different other exclusions for having to register as an agent in a state? Now we're talking about in a state. Okay. So let's say you're in New York and you have a customer visiting Florida, like somebody visiting down there where I live now, right? But I am not registered in that state, but my customer is just visiting. You do not have to register in this state. That is the vacation rule. That is an exemption. Institution rule. If you only deal with institutions, and again, let's just say something else. If you don't have an office in the state, no state, no retail, no register. That's kind of the way we're going to go with that thing. No state, no retail, no register. So if you're the institution, if you're only dealing with institutions and you don't have an office in the state, you don't have to register. Clerical roles. Also, they use the word ministerial, which is like that's got to be something from the 30s because I've never heard any human being in my lifetime say it, and I was born in 1962. So, ministerial and clerical are the same. What does that mean? If you're somebody who works at a firm and you just make appointments and you're not doing anything that's relating to the investment decisions of the client, you're clerical, you don't have to register. You're picking up phones, you're making appointments, but maybe giving quotes at the most. Anything past that, that's it. You can't do that. And as we spoke of earlier, representing an issue of exempt securities or exempt transactions, then you don't have to. You work for the government, you're selling treasuries, right? Treasuries are an exempt security, and that is an exempt transaction. Okay, now we're going to move on to uh, box number three, right? So far, we have broker dealers, we have agents, those are together. And now we're going to have investment advisor. An investment advisor is a firm. And this is, again, this is a person. And what is a person? Any entity that can sign a contract. So this is an entity that is offering advice or analysis. They call it the ABC, okay? Advice or analysis as a regular part of the business for compensation. Advice and analysis is that they're either giving investment advisory, they're giving investment advice straight up, or maybe it's even a portfolio manager running indirectly giving advice, running your portfolio, or research, advice, or analysis as a regular part of the business. That's what they do, and they're getting paid. And that's a big part of this. Getting paid is part of it. Okay. Advice as a or analysis as a regular part of the business for compensation. What is the difference between the IA and the BD? The IA is telling you is giving you advice on what to invest in, or it actually doing it for you and getting paid for that advice. The broker dealer is getting paid to actually affect the transaction. Again, either through agency or principal, either through commission or markup, markdown as a market maker. When an IA wants to register with the state or with a SEC, they do what they call Form ADV, Form Advisor, ADV. And there's three parts to this form. The first part is part one. This is the basics of the company, where the company is, what kind of assets they run, what the business structure is, but not specifically who yet, um, and any other conflicts that the business itself might have. Part 2A is what we call the narrative, and this is the beginning of the brochure supplement. So part 2A will have the narrative of the firm, which will include fees and disclosure, how they invest, what they invest in, anything that goes to the narrative of what the firm of what their investing philosophy is. That's going to be in 2A. And as I said, fees and disclosures and any conflicts that the firm has, any disclosures they need to make that way. And 2B is going to cover, and we'll get a little more into detail this ADV. I'll do some separate ones on this, but and then 2B is about the person, about the people who work there, maybe their education, experience level, what their conflicts are, where else they're making compensation. Form ADVW is the withdrawal form. So if an advisor wants to leave leave either SEC, FINRA, or a state, they file an ADVW, and those take effect in 30 days. So when they file the ADVW, that means just they're leaving. You really don't have to know too much more than the idea that the ADVW is the way that they file to leave an admin or a jurisdiction, and it's good within 30 days. Now, the de minimis rule, de minimis. De minimis, only investment advisor reps. If you remember, I said earlier that if there's no office in the state, first of all, if there is an office, if you are going into a state to do business and there's an office, you're going to be registering. Just assume that straight out. Okay. All bets are off once there's an office in the state. If there's no office in the state, then we might get through with some of these exclusions. Okay. So one of them is the minimis rule. If an investment advisor has less than five or less people, retail clients in the state, they don't, and no office in the state, they don't have to register in the state. Folks, this is not true for BDs. This is only for investment advisors. Okay. Also, investment advisor reps have the same rule. If they have five or less customers in the state and no office, they're good. They're good to go. Okay. Um, one thing I will add to that is that no, I think I'll leave that at that. Five or less is a number, and that's okay. So if let's say that a company that was in New York and decided to do business in Vermont, if the IA had six customers in Vermont, they would have to register because they're de minimis. But let's say they had two IARs and work in Vermont, and each one of them only had three clients each, they would not have to register. Okay, so the de minimis is for the IA and for the IARs. Next one is LATE, where we had from my brother Ken Finnen, who by the way, Capital Advantage tutoring, brilliant material. He knows this stuff inside out. His videos are amazing and super detailed. And this is 50 years of experience when he's talking. But one of ones he's always come up with is PLATE, which is so if you are a lawyer, an accountant, a teacher, or an engineer, and he had a publisher, and you are giving investment advice incrementally in your business, and you're not getting paid, you get the exemption. You do not have to register as an investment advisor as long as you're not getting paid. So LATE, publish a PLATE, publisher, lawyer, accountant, teacher, engineer. If you're doing one of those professions and you're giving advice, but you're not getting paid, you do not have to register. But as soon as you get paid, and when I say get paid, I mean get paid for the advice. You can get paid for your accounting, you get paid for your teaching. But if you're getting paid a separate fee for teaching, for accounting, for giving it investment advice, then you have to register. One other sideshow is that that's also the criteria for whether you have to be when they ask you if you're an investment advisor rep or an agent or an investment advisor BD, and you give, so let's say you're a broker dealer and you give investment advice. Do you have to register as investment advisor? And the answer is only if you're taking a separate fee for the investment advice. If you're just getting your commission, you're good. You don't have to, you just it's an incremental part of your business. But if you're taking a separate amount of money for investment advice, then that is going to require you to be required to be registered as an IA or an IAR also. The last part of the four box compartmentalization of broker dealers, agents, IAs and IARs is IARs. Okay. IARs, what are they? These are investment advisor reps. These are people, natural human beings who represent investment advisors. They provide securities advice on the behalf of the IA. Okay. So that is a partner, officer, director, or any employee, which is what you think of as a classic representative, providing securities advice. Now, the partners, officers, and directors are going to get listed automatically on the ADV form. And the employees who have to get registered are also going to be on that form. Um, the registration form for an IAR is U4. Okay. Same as an agent. U4 is what you register with to come in. U5 is what you register to come out. Now let's talk about just hit on something else of on the U4, and this is the big one, is what starts a statutory disqualification, what qualifies as a statutory disqualification, and what qualifies as just something else that is going to be okay. So here's the way that I go with this. If you've committed a felony in the past 10 years, you're not going to get your U4 is not going to, this is going to be statutory disqualified. If you've committed a securities related misdemeanor in the past 10 years, that is going to be statutory disqualified, a securities related misdemeanor, or a felony, you're not getting registered. Okay. After 10 years, 10 years from the point of you committed that, then you still have to let them know that you still have to file that as something that happened. But you'll probably still be okay as far as getting registered after 10 years. Also, any any charge you have to let them know on that. Now, if it's just a charge, they can't. That is not going to statutorily disqualify you. Look out for that on task conviction versus charges. Now, here's my example. This is now sound crazy. If you go to the bar, all right, I'm sorry. If you beat up your wife, you go to the bar, go have a fight with three or four people, break one of the guy's jaws, rob the place on your way out, but you get a good lawyer and you can get that reduced to a misdemeanor, welcome to our trading desk. Okay. So the court, it's not a securities related felony. You got it knocked down to a misdemeanor. It's just a little light battery assault and battery. That is an example of that. You could still be on the desk. I think I worked with some of those guys over the years. So a felony first within 10 years, problem. Securities related misdemeanor within 10 years, problem. After 10 years, you just have to report the charge. You have to report that it happened. All right. Here are some of the exclusions that go along with the IAR, investment advisor rep. You have the same vacation we talked about earlier. Okay. If you have a client who's visiting another state and they're on vacation and there have to be a present client, you can't solicit a new client doing this vacation rule. De minimis rule we talked about, right? Five or less retail customers in a state and you don't have an office, you don't have to register. Institution rule, late rule, we talked about. All right, media programs. So here's a rule on that. So think about like Susie Orman or Dave Ramsey. As long as you're giving general advice and not specific portfolio advice to specific people, you don't have to be registered. Now I've always thought to myself, I never quite get like how Kramer gets through that with that bye when people call the lightning round. I don't know though. I'm not the one writing the rules. So if you have a media program and you're just giving general advice, you're okay. Broker dealers and agents with no advisory fees. Again, if you're a broker dealer and you give it or an agent and you give advice, investment advice, but you don't charge for that, you just charge for your commission, you don't have to be registered. If you charge separately, then you have to do it. A private fund advisor up to $150 million. What is that? That is a hedge fund, a family office, private. They do not have to register. Again, private fund advisors, very unique rule compared to what we're going to do later. Private fund advisors do not have to register up to $150 million in AUM. Federally covered advisors, they don't have to register with the state. Okay. What is a federally covered advisor? A Reg D, a NASDAQ or NYSE security, or any kind of investment company. That's a tricky one. Okay. Got to keep an eye on that. If you deal with investment companies, that's got to be federally registered, not state. And bank and saving institutions don't have to register because they have bank laws. What's the exception on that? Bank holding companies, right? And you're going to see that and what is a bank holding company? A bank holding company is like JP Morgan or Bank America. They have multiple different businesses within their bank. Okay, so that finishes up this section of the four big compartmentalizing. It's not easy for me to say. Broker dealers, agents, IAs, and IARs. I'm going to, this will be part one of the Series 63 video. We will get into all the other details on parts two and maybe part three. I'm hoping to do this in two parts, but we'll see how it goes. All right, again, this is Mike Finnen from Buttonwood Tutors. My website is buttonwoodtutors.com. If you find you're really struggling with the test and you need some tutoring help, feel free to either text me or email me or hit me up or just sign up. Thanks a lot. I'll talk to you later.